Hello, everyone, and welcome for joining us today. I guess this is the get going sign. Absolutely happy to meet you all in celebration of the ICF, the International Coach or Coaching Federation Coaching Week. Um, Congratulations to begin with to the ICF completing 30 years this year. Um, our special thanks as well to, of course, to all of you, to our speakers here, and especially to the ICF Jordan chapter for hosting us and giving us this opportunity to share with you, hopefully, what you will find by the end of the session, informative and insightful session. The ICF Coaching Week this year is shaping futures through coaching. I think we all have benefited from coaching. So definitely it's the way to shape our future. To our guests, we're going to open for you and give you time for questions, comments by the end of the session. So do please bear with us. And without further ado, thank you all and welcome. Our speakers today, so we've got Uzma, Emily, and Rana. I'll give you the mic in a minute to introduce yourselves. Uzma is a neurodiversity coach, international coach, in a way. Um, a mother, an advocate. And we've got Emily. Emily, with her experience working with businesses, corporate, and psychology. Hopefully, if we have the time, Emily, we will, touch upon psychology and coaching because I have learned as well that coaching, contributes or has contributed a lot to coaching. Last but not least, Rana, with her expertise in communication, again, building and shaping businesses to get better outcomes all through coaching. So, to our speakers today, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, Rana, maybe we start with you. If you could please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm the founding director of my company is called YARNU, which is an Arabic word meaning to aspire to look towards with calm and serenity. And everything I do is about shifting behavior and attitude. So working with companies to work on their organizational culture. I'm also certified in ICI, intercultural intelligence. So it fits perfectly well with today's topic of this session. How does our different cultural worldviews affect the way that we communicate, the way that we look at the world, the way that we do everything? So I work with businesses, large and small, helping them to create the kind of culture that aligns with their values to get the best out of it, to get to their objectives, basically.
Lovely. Yeah, and thank you for the reminder as well. So our theme today, our specific theme is coaching without borders. So it's all about bringing everyone together, working together all around the world. Thank you, Rana. Absolutely appreciate it. Emily, would you like to go next?
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, good evening to everyone from all parts of the globe today. I come to you from the East Coast of the United States in North Carolina. My name is Emily Nybo, and over the last 15 years, I've worked both inside very large companies as well as some small startups. And I get to bring a global perspective to how do we bring data and problem solving within business context, within team and organizational context, to engineer intentional spaces where employees feel valued and that they can thrive. So from a job title perspective, that means I've worked in DEIB for the last 8 years. But I've been in and out of different aspects of human capital, bringing that broad lens to how can we be very intentional as we show up as leaders in whatever capacity that may be. So I am currently getting to serve organizations and coaching clients to redesign work intentionally, especially as we're in a very dynamic economy, a very dynamic time to be alive, all of that type of thing, future of work. I've dropped a whole bunch of buzzwords, but I'm excited about making work better. And I'm excited about maybe sharing a little bit of anything that I've had. If it helps others do the same, then I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to learn from the other brilliant speakers that are on this panel today. So thank you, Jacob.
You're welcome. It is quite, dynamic time, absolutely. And you also, you mentioned, Emily, you are in the US, we've got Rana in Jordan, Uzma in the UK, and myself in Canada. And I'm sure the speakers as well are all scattered around the world. So what a brilliant environment we already got here. Uzma,
Yes, thank you so much.
go
Thank
ahead.
you, Jacob. Can you guys hear me clearly? Yep,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, it was a bit choppy earlier on, but it's all good now. Okay, so I'm the founder of Uzma Akser Coaching and Consulting, an executive leadership coach, a neurodiversity consultant, certified autism specialist, and really, I guess, putting my titles out there doesn't really. I'll just kind of sum up what I do. I push for neurodiversity, neuroinclusion in an organic way. If that means neuroinclusion in the home, if we have a neurodivergent child, the parents supporting that child. If it means the educational sector, the educators supporting that child who learns differently. And then we have that child growing up to become a young adult, entering the workplace, and then I support organizations through training and coaching, really to support them in how to make their practice, the organization, neuro-inclusive. And that's really my biggest passion. And I think, I'd like to add here, it started because of my child. So my background was, I didn't have neurodiversity experience or educational background. It was all through my lived experience. I have a child who's 15. He's on the autism spectrum, and just working with him, reassured me that if we support our children, we connect with our children, we can really break down those barriers, and prove to the world that these individuals who may think differently have a space to belong in this world. And so I'm really thrilled. I'm thrilled to be here to join in the conversation. I'm looking forward to sharing and also learning from you guys, Rana, Emily. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today.
You're very welcome, Uzma. And here you have it, dear audience, starting from home all the way, growing up till the workplace. So I hope we've got the perfect panelist for you. Starting with our speakers, how would you define belonging? Rana, would you like to go first?
Well, that's a really
Good
big
question.
topic. Big question, big topic, and it really depends on, I guess, from which perspective you're looking at it. To put it very, very, very basically, very simply, is I guess I would feel I belong when I feel safe, understood, not judged.
Yeah.
In whatever environment I'm in, whatever place I'm in. I guess that's the kind of my perspective of what belonging would feel like.
Right. Not judged. That immediately rings the bell of coaching. So thank you. Right. Emily.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So I, as someone who uses coaching as a small piece of what I do, I mostly see myself as a DEIB strategist or practitioner for organizations and the groups that I work with. And in that context, belonging is ultimately an output. It is what can be measured sometimes on an employee effectiveness survey. What is the lived experience of our employees when they show up to work? Are they able to embody psychological safety? Do they feel psychological agency? Do they feel like they belong, right? And I say that belonging is an output because it's often what is tried to be designed for. But with that in mind, if you take a systems approach, you've really got to make sure that you have representation of perspective, so you have that all different types of diversity, right? You've got to have the diversity. You have to have the internal accountability or equity. I see equity as a system of accountability a lot of times. And then you have to have the intentional actions of inclusion, which ultimately will then hopefully drive to the inputs of belonging. But I say that, yes, belonging is what we hope that employees or members of an organization feel, but you can design for it in mind, but you can't just magically hope that it happens. So yeah, it's an output of a well-designed and executed system that takes a lot of intention and effort.
So there isn't a magical wand then.
Whew, no, we wouldn't have jobs, would we?
True. Emily, I'd assume DEIB, this is diversity.
Yes, technically, it's one of the many alphabets that we have, but diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. That big B at the end is we don't just say D&I anymore, or I don't just say D&I. And in some certain letters are getting dropped in certain countries for different reasons, but regardless, we want to design systems that allow people to show up as their best and experience themselves as Rana said, those feelings of belonging, right? We can usually identify with what are those feelings of belonging, but as coaches and leaders that are hoping to shape the containers in which our customers, our employees exist, we can't just say, yeah, we're going to create for belonging, right? Because it's kind of that we have to address the intention of that step one. And if belonging is step three, all of the work goes into that step two. And it's hard to talk about sometimes, but you gotta have all the pieces in order for it to truly work.
Yeah, I think throughout this session, eventually we will address the challenges, because every time, we think about the workplace, we do have big dreams, but then how to get there? That's always the question. Uzma, to you, what is belonging?
I think for me, I'm going to start with community. I feel like belonging is when a human being is really part of that community and feels, feels valued, feels seen, feels heard, and can feel comfortable bringing themselves into any kind of context. It could be, we're talking about work right now, so it could be work. But for me, I'm going to say, as a parent, as a professional, really being seen and heard and not being judged, that's a big one. And I think the only way we can really feel that get that full feeling of belonging is if we are part of that community. It makes a huge difference.
If I may bring in coaching here. So when we say belonging, you mentioned, feeling safe. You mentioned, feeling part of a group, be it small or big. How coaching, if we want to address and touch upon practical tips, how coaching can help with belonging? Emily, let me start with you.
Sure. I will say, I will leave this mostly to the more predominant coaches on the call, but I will say one of the first things that I've worked with a lot of leaders with is how do they see themselves as belonging themselves, stepping into spaces. If I'm working with a woman that is the only in the space that she's in, or if I am working with a man in a predominant male workplace, how do I make sure that as a leader, they step into what does it look like to be an ally, or what does it look like to be an inclusive leader, and how do they embody that themselves? Because it starts with the individual. That's going to be where I set my baseline, and I'll leave the rest of the coaches so we can further unpack.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to Uzma.
I agree. I mean, I agree with what Emily said, Jacob, here, because the baseline is the main, I think, or the most important, and how they feel as leaders are really, they're setting an example, you know. I wanted to share a little a story of, so I was delivering a training in December, and there was a leader, and he was the senior manager actually in the team, and he was coming into work with a very kind of negative attitude towards one of the team members who was neurodivergent. And this kind of trickled down to everybody in the team. So that particular employee was really feeling it, you know. And we had this 4-week program that we were delivering to the organization. And week 1, he was very honest and authentic, and he kind of said it out loud. And I asked some coaching questions through the training, and the following week he came in and he said to me, you know, things have really changed. Things have changed because my attitude changed. As a leader, I was presenting myself differently to the team. I was behaving differently to this particular employee, and now the whole team is working differently. So I definitely agree with what Emily said. We have to be that example, and we have to be comfortable first and foremost, and then, you know, be that example for others.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Uzma.
You're welcome.
Rana, what would you like to add?
Yes, actually. So I agree with both Emily and Uzma, and I'd like to take it like 2 steps further. Everything starts from self-awareness. And as coaches, we're working with people and we have such a huge amount of influence on the client that we are working with. So it is essential that as coaches that we are aware of what's going on inside of us. So we know that we've been taught to be aware of what we think, our emotions, and therefore our action, so that we know what's going on inside of us, our emotional intelligence, to be able to then not get triggered by whatever the client is going through. But here, I would say, take it even a step further. So in addition to that, there is something else that we need to be really aware of, and that's our own cultural perspective. The way that we look at the world, the glasses through which we look at the world and judge and determine what is appropriate, what is not, what's offensive and what's not. And that needs to start with an honest look inside myself to understand what is my own worldview. And that worldview comes from my own personal experiences. So we can look at it as is it the passport that I carry? Is it the nationality of my parents? Is it where I've lived most of the time? It's all of those together help us create our own self-culture. And by first understanding what is my own self-culture, how am I judging what's going on around me, only then I'm able to anticipate other people's behavior, correctly interpret that behavior, and then allow myself to adjust my own behavior to suit the situation, the culturally motivated situation that I'm in. So just to give you a simple example, certain words, we think we use certain words that are universal and they mean the same thing to everybody, we assume. So for example, I trust you, right? I trust you. It's very basic, it's very simple, very straightforward. What else can it mean? But I trust you can mean I trust you will do the right thing. Or I trust you could mean I trust you will do the honorable thing. Honorable and right are very different. Or I trust you could mean I trust you will protect me. So we say, well, I trust you, but you betrayed me. What do you mean I betrayed you? I did the right thing. Yes, but you didn't protect me. And that comes from our cultural worldview. And just to speak to what Emily was saying as well, how we say that belonging is an outcome, absolutely. And one of the things that we do as well through the ICI tools is we create what we call a third culture space that brings in the best values of each of our different worldviews to create this third space in the office that will help where everyone feels honored, where everyone feels that they are right or doing the right thing, and where everyone feels empowered. So that's another way of looking at belonging. And as coaches, I think it is so important for us to understand that cultural perspective, and not to make assumptions based on our own cultural worldview, and to be really like triple aware of the language that we use, and not to assume that the same word means the same thing to different people.
You know, Rana, you're sharing this wonderful insight, and I'm just, getting those questions. Probably I wasn't really active. I hope that was active listening, but but yeah. I don't know where to start. So let me get with you mentioned honesty and no judgment. So this is for all the panelists. Um, Personally, I would, think, sometimes being honest might be the opposite of judgment. How do you touch upon this? Starting with Uzma.
Wow. Right. Being honest without any judgment.
Yeah.
Oof. What I see, I mean, the word that comes to my head is clean slate, if that makes any sense. And again, I'm going back to Rana with cultural, right, words here. Coming into coaching without any judgment. So coming in with this clean slate before you even see your client, before you even meet the coachee, you walk in, despite what the coach is bringing to you in the situation or in the session, you
Yeah.
are that clean slate. You're blank completely. So you don't hold any judgment.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So you come in completely open to what they're
Okay.
going to say, and you hold no reservation or any judgment. It can be tricky, but I guess that's how we're trained to do our job.
All right. Okay, so we start with a clean slate.
Yeah.
That's fine. If I go to Emily, so I have already that no judgment, clean slate. How
Yeah,
do I
so
add honesty to it now?
how do I add honesty to it? So I think honesty to me is, I think of how does someone show up and speak voice to their truth, which has
Okay.
a lot of assumptions, right? So that is going to be then limited by someone's ability to have self-awareness.
Okay.
So when you were initially asking the question, Jacob, I realized there were two phrases that I dropped earlier that I want, and using Rana's most recent comment of let's make sure that we are all on the same page with specific use of language.
Yeah.
Two principles. One, psychological safety, that idea that individuals are able to safely show up without feeling judged or be able to speak their voice without fear of reprisal. There's a second thing that isn't as popular because psychological safety has almost become a buzzword in the zeitgeist in the past few years. This idea of psychological agency, and that is, what level does one feel safe being able to choose? How do I step into this space, leveraging all of their different identities, right? I say those two things because I think in order to be empowered to show up authentically, a leader, a coachee, once they leave the container in which we're talking with them, right? How they show up when they're in the rest of the world, have to have an understanding of how psychological safety and psychological agency are present in the different meetings, spaces, buildings, right, through which they go. And the level of which psychological safety and psychological agency are often navigated in intercultural spaces has to do with our level of understanding or our level of comfort of rubbing up against differences that make a difference. So we can unpack that, differences that make a difference. Those are going to be the differences that could potentially cause resistance or make us, or if I have a difference of my personal identity that's very important to me, that I want to be seen for, but it's something that may be culturally minimized in another cultural context, that's a difference that makes a difference. So from a diversity practitioner, from an organizational effectiveness, like cultural lens, I put all of that in there because I don't necessarily think that honesty is the difference, is the separation or the opposite is the word you used.
Yes.
Judgment.
Yeah.
I think it's how do we empower people to speak a constructive truth in a way that is both productive and positive when we think about honesty. And there are so many levels that come underneath that in terms of how do we have self-awareness, right? So I think authenticity is what I'm struggling, or some of my clients and organizations are struggling with the most. How do leaders show up authentically in their truth and then navigate in a way that is positive, professional, and kind within those things as they rub up against differences that make a difference. But the idea of a blank slate or no judgment is something that I love holding in group contexts. And I say that because to understand and make decisions of all of the other things that we've discussed, differences that make a difference, et cetera, everyone has to be able to have an abject expression of truth. And that requires so much courage, I think, of everyone in the space. But yeah, so I gave you way more than you were talking than I think you asked for. But honesty is not what honesty is never what I'm going for. But as a facilitator, as a coach, how do I empower those that I serve to show up in a way that they're able to embody their full selves, their full truth, to create the entry point for others to engage the same, which is hard.
Lovely. Got psychological safety, agency, and authenticity. So there is hopefully no conflict. Rana, what would you like to add? Especially, you mentioned, and you kind of ahead of the game. I was going to touch upon biases, so you already talked about it. So how do we've got honesty, we've got judgment, we've got biases. How do we deal with all that?
To be very honest here,
Yes,
so we're talking about honesty.
Yeah.
My personal opinion is that we're all human beings, and I believe it is impossible for us to be not judgmental.
Okay.
We are, by nature, we have our own biases. We're unconscious biases, so we're unaware of them. They're humming underneath the surface. They're always there, right?
Yeah.
So it's impossible for us to be non-judgmental. However, as coaches, we are trained to be self-aware that when that judgment starts to come up, that judging voice starts to come up, if I am self-aware, I can recognize that this is happening, and then I'm able to kind of turn down the volume and shift my focus and attention to really looking at, with authenticity, to that human being that I'm trying to serve to the best of my capability. So that's the first part about non-judgment and honesty. The other thing that I wanted to add here is I want to keep going back to the intercultural perspective of it. Even the concept of honesty. What's honest? In some cultures, it's very direct style of communications. I hear what I say, I mean what I say what I mean. Very straightforward, very direct. In other cultures, it's very indirect. While I want to speak my truth, as Emily says, and be honest, I've got so many other things that I'm juggling in the background. I want to save my face. I want to maintain the relationship. I don't want to do or say anything that can damage our relationship. If you are more senior to me, like my boss, I definitely don't want to offend you. So we use a very indirect style of communications. So then being honest becomes something that's very different, that looks very different, depending on which culture you're in. So just saying what I mean and meaning what I say, being very blunt and straightforward, can be seen as incredibly offensive and can damage that relationship beyond repair, if you like. So again, that's all of that. There's so many nuances, and there's so much that we need to be aware of. So instead of just taking those concepts that we think they're universal concepts: honesty, authenticity, trust. But what do they look like in these different cultures? And it is so critical as coaches, if we are working with people from different cultures, to be aware of what's playing in the background, what's happening, kind of reading the air, as some refer to it.
Yeah. Yeah, you reminded me, Rana, with what's called the theory of politeness, which is how people interact, and this is from linguistics.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for that. And by the way, this is to the audience. I do hope that you get in all your questions ready and comments and feedback. Rana is touching quite a lot on cultural and intercultural. I think, Rana, you have written a book on it, haven't you?
Yes. So the book is called When in the Arab World, an
Yeah,
insider's guide to living and working with Arab culture. And
yeah,
that's specifically for non-Arabs to understand what are the main motivators of behavior. So it's not a list of do's and don'ts, because that is completely useless. So it's looking at the main motivators of behavior,
right,
Arab culture, and that will help us non-Arabs to understand how things are done and why we do the things that we do.
lovely.
So it's excellent guide for business people, for students, and it's very interesting. I've found that some of the feedback that I've received is from younger Arabs who have been living outside of the Arab world for quite a while. And they find it very useful to understand why their parents do the things that they do. And they say,
Okay.
oh, that's why we do it. Now, we've always been doing that, but I don't understand why we do it.
Thank you. Right. So coaching, inclusion, biases, all what you have mentioned, Uzma, Emily, and Rana. Any stories you'd like to share that you have applied, coaching to help belonging, to help inclusion in environment, and you have either heard or witnessed some, let's say, great outcomes and results? Any stories you'd like to share? And feel free to jump in. Yes, Emily.
Sure. So I can share without getting into any specifics. I've had several leaders on different continents that
Yeah,
have been resistant, we'll say, to a certain organizational, maybe like DEIB diversity type initiative, right? You
right.
know, and the main resistance that a lot of people initially have has to do with, oh, well, I don't relate with that at
Yeah,
all. Okay, let's get to a human element of, are you a, if it's a man that we're trying to get to be more sensitive to the expressed lived experiences of women employees in the workplace,
right.
what are the human elements? Are you a partner, a child, a parent, whatever it may be? What is something that's an important relation to you that can help you see the value? And then, okay, so you don't have lived experience in this, but others do. How can we be humans first? I will say that any of the kind of group coaching and individual coaching that I've had with folks, two principles. The first is, let's tie that human element into it, because I do believe, I think it was Rana, it may have been Uzma, someone mentioned, we're all human beings first, right? So let's bring it back to that. We're humans first before we show up in another space. And then the second thing, Uzma mentioned blank slate, or this idea of non-judgment. If we're
Yeah,
trying to get someone to change behavior and
yeah,
they already have walls up for resistance for whatever reason, right? It may be uncomfortable. It may be if there's guilt involved, right? If there have been systemic injustices that someone's like, oh, I don't want to be a problem if I'm not a part of the problem, right? It's like, okay, let's remove all the judgment. You're not a part of the problem. We're just asking you to step in as a leader to demonstrate a new behavior or to whatever it is.
Yeah.
Remove the past, allow that blank slate to be whatever beliefs you have are yours. And that's fine. None of them are bad, right? It's external context that put labels on things of good or bad, whatever that is. But as we're expecting people to show up in transformation, how do we create a space, good or bad, that they can bring their human to work in a way that then helps amplify the new embodiment, the new change that we want them to show on the other side. So yeah, be humans first and take away any non-judgment. So I won't go deep into it, but I'm actually certified in a similar but different assessment called the Intercultural Development Inventory. And it looks at how do we as individuals navigate difference, especially how others navigate difference. And whatever the assessment is, right? Gain self-awareness. I think of understanding how we show up as humans and how we can remove limitations of judgment to change behavior.
We are humans first. Absolutely true. With that, so you mentioned labeling, good or bad. That just brought this, that probably you have all heard of it or seen it. Would you eat pizza with pineapples? And then the whole world just exploded. Two teams. A team is a yes, and the other team is a no way. But yeah. Uzma, would you like to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Emily's spoken about, the human element, it's so important. I mean, with my background and the work I do, an example I'd like to share is we had a young adult, a 27-year-old young gentleman who was going through various challenges with communication, social interaction, anxiety, and I spent one-on-one time with him, and I worked with him for a good amount of time. And hang on, I've just got to confirm your speaking language. I'm not sure what that is. Okay, so I spent
ignore that one.
I spent a good amount of time with him to get him ready for the workplace. And it was his father's actually business that he was going back into. So he was initially there shredding paper, right? That was his job. He was shredding paper all day long. And he enjoyed it, but he wanted more. So we worked on, I spent a lot of one-to-one, sessions with him where I spent time, working on the language, the social skills, and kind of got him ready for the workplace. And it wasn't him that was the problem. It was the rest of the organization. It was a small company, right? It was the rest of the company because, as Emily mentioned, that human touch, the human element was missing. He came in as that individual who was, shredding paper all day long, now has had, some form of transformation. He's working on his social skills. He wants to do more than what he was doing, but it was the judgment that others held that was a challenge. So I guess when we remove those barriers for individuals who are neurodivergent, in my case, that's what I spend my time doing, we can open many opportunities. So the biggest thing is, like Emily mentioned, that being human and understanding that everyone's different, and let's not judge for who they are and what they do.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing this, man.
You're welcome.
Rana, back to you.
Yeah. I'm going to pick up on the theme of we are all human, and let's not forget that. So the human aspect. It's so from my experience and the clients that I work with, I've noticed how much looking specifically, and perhaps it's part of the Arab culture as well, is young men, males, who are in their 30s, 40s, so they're kind of middle management, middle upper management. They're ready to jump to that next level, that upper level. They've got their technical skills down, everything's great, but now they're asked to be, it's not about their technical skills, it's about their people skills. And
Yeah.
so in order to be a better, more impactful manager, they need to, of course, understand themselves a lot better. And
Yeah.
kind of, I guess, unfortunately, part of the Arab culture is how we bring up our boys, is that, you know, you have to be strong, you can't show emotion because emotions are weak, you can't talk about those emotions, you can't cry, you can't do all of those things.
Sorry to interrupt. You're not being judgmental here.
This is
Sorry.
an observation
I
of
couldn't
how
resist.
our culture brings up boys,
Carry on.
and the difficulties that they end up facing when they're in their 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
stepping up to those bigger responsibilities, and they are. I'm generalizing here. I'm using that as a very general term, but they are really struggling in trying to understand what's going on inside here, trying to understand their emotions, and they find it very difficult to find somebody to talk to, because guy friends, they're just there to, you know, I call it the hubba hubba kind of thing. You know, we don't talk about emotions. We don't talk about it.
That's us.
Yep.
Guilty.
Yeah. For women, we generally have a network, a support network, that we like to talk about our emotions. Again, I'm generalizing here.
Yeah.
But for the men, especially in that age group, it's much more difficult. And so that's when the coaching, the one-on-one coaching, I have found has had huge impact on them. That their ability to actually sit with somebody in a safe, confidential space, they're able to express those emotions, cry if they feel they need to, but to really go through all their struggles, their difficulties as human beings. Then that all clears up so much. Then they're able to actually show up in their business, place of business, as leaders with so much more empathy, because they have become more empathetic with themselves and heard themselves and sorted out their own emotional issues. And then they're able to show up more authentic, more whole, and able to lead other people, not tasks and numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think empathy and or compassion definitely go a long way. If I want to go back to coaching, so Emily, Uzma, and Rana, you know, as a coach, we always say, all right, so you are neutral, you don't give advice, but then you think of advocacy, so you really want to push something forward, ahead. How would you combine these two? So I'm a coach. There's no judgment, of course. I don't give advice, or would you go with this school of thought that, yeah, I would push that advice ahead? Right. So Uzma, I see you
Yeah,
smiling.
I'm smiling because it happened to me yesterday, actually. It's an interesting question that you're asking, Jacob.
Yeah.
I was delivering a group coaching session yesterday for mothers of neurodivergent children. And one of the mothers that showed up yesterday, she said, you know, I'm really struggling with my child because he's a lovely boy, but you know, according to our society, his behavior is not socially appropriate, right? So when he's in the park, you know, children play with him for about 20, 30 minutes and then they leave. So he doesn't have a friendship circle.
Yeah.
And that was really the big thing that came in, you know, in the session yesterday. So I'm also an advocate, right? So,
Yes.
and here's me trying to, you know, keep calm. And I'm okay, you know, what can we do? I'm coaching right now, right?
Right.
So what is it that you can do as a mum? You know, what do you want? You know, what outcome are you looking for today? You said, I want my son to have friends. I just want my son to have friends. Um, and then again, it's my advocacy's pushing in, but I'm trying to stay quiet. Um, because it's a group coaching session, I asked her a few questions and I said, okay, now, you know, I'll give you a few minutes. You can write your note, you know, write your thoughts down and come back. And she said, no,
Yeah.
but I need to know I need to know what to do. Can you tell me how my son can have friends?
Right.
You're a mother as well, surely you can share your lived experience. And so again, I'm like, okay, you go off and, think about it and we'll come back to you in a few minutes. And when she did come back, actually, she had clarity.
Right.
It was very tricky for me because I wanted to say a lot more than I could as a coach. But she had clarity. She knew exactly what she wanted, and she came forward and said, well, actually, my son doesn't need 10 friends. He only needs that one good friend. And I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to see if I can approach parent support groups and
Yeah.
have a play date. And if that one friend comes forward and that one friend is good enough for him, I'm happy with that. But initially, the whole conversation was very different. So I guess the whole advocacy and the coaching, especially I think my day-to-day job, it's tricky because I'm so passionate about what I do.
Yeah.
And I sometimes do want to just give the answers or do something about it to support them and fix the problem. But I try my best to allow them to have that space because they're the best advocate for their child.
We know ourselves the best. Emily, if I may go to you next.
You're on mute, I think, for some reason.
You're on mute.
One second,
Yeah.
1
you.
second.
Is that okay?
No, I've been unmuted. Yeah, I muted myself, not aware that I couldn't unmute myself later. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
all right.
It's hard, right? But I think, as a coach, when I'm brought in as a coach, it's usually to kind of drive specific behaviors. So there's already a little bit more direction that individuals have before they work with me. I will say, as a facilitator and as an external diversity consultant, I have to really make sure that I'm aligning to what does the business want to own, right? Because even if I'm inside an organization, when I've been in full-time roles leading internal diversity teams, if the organization doesn't have a clear sense of alignment on how this ties to the business, advocacy is actually is more harmful than it is helpful. And I think that's what we've seen in a lot of the, why are we not seeing the ROI of DEI? A lot of it comes down to chasing aspirational ideas without actually being grounded in what are sustainable, cultivatable behaviors that we're doing. So of course, yes, I have lots of things that my head and my heart believe, but in order to be functional and in order for me to deliver value to the highest and most impactful effort, I have to hold my tongue on the advocacy piece and at most guide what is the space in the room that they are going to take guided action. As a consultant, if I want to share best practices, sure, absolutely, but you have to share in a way that you help guide that next actionable step. If I influence for anything, it's how do I guide them to take the next actionable step in alignment towards something. Because I do think a lot of heavily passionate diversity practitioners, if they push too hard, but the rest of the organization didn't come with them, we're not going to get out of some of the problems that we have in some of the organizations we have now. I don't think I need to say anymore. I think I've said enough. People can get where I'm going with that. But yeah, we've got to step in a way that is in alignment with a collective in order to drive change. So yeah, advocacy, I would love it, but there's not a place for it. It's actually more harm than it is help.
Thank you. So that's coaching. Rana, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I totally agree with Emily on that one, and I have been burnt in that way, and I have had my advice monster kind of make the best out of me in several occasions, and it was I regretted it afterwards because it really does. As Emily was saying, it does alienate. It actually works against what I was trying to get them to do, because you take away the free agency from them, and they're not thinking about the solution themselves. It's been imposed on them. And it comes across as kind of, pushing my own agenda or my own beliefs. And it doesn't look good. It doesn't sit well. It doesn't have the kind of impact that I thought it would have. So it becomes really more harmful. And Uzma, the example that you used of when you kept yourself under control and you gave them the space, they got to it, and they got to it in a much better way than perhaps you would have suggested.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've learned that the hard way.
So this is interesting, and I'm going to start with you, Rana, here. So you have learned this the hard way. Let's say for the rest of us to really, hold our tongues and focus more on guidance in the way of coaching. So I'm asking you powerful questions because you know yourself better than me, and I'm trying not to give advice. So from a practical way, how do I train myself to really, hold my horses, as they say, don't give advice, especially thinking that advice is a shortcut, get things done, that's it. So, Rana.
Yeah, and if I just may, and the other thing that I also was burnt with is packaging advice in question form. We know that trick so well. Have you tried this? Have you thought about this? I'm asking a question, but it's actually advice. It's not a question. So we all know that. So, but we can sometimes, our brain plays that trick on us, and it says, but I'm not giving advice. I'm just, making them see this option. Okay.
Yeah.
Clarifying another way or another option. Maybe they just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
I've been down that thought process, and it's the exact same thing. It's just giving advice and advocating for whatever I think might be the best solution.
Right. Emily, what would you like to share here? Practical tips.
Sure. I think practically, as a coach, educator, and facilitator of often awkward conversations, because that is the nature of what I do, right? Practically, I think as a practitioner, being very aware in myself and how does my energy change? What are the triggers of my, what arouses my nervous system, right? So how can I stay completely grounded, even under the most hostile of topics, mediations, whatever that may be? And if I am calm, cool, and okay with whatever may happen, because when I've been brought in as a culture coach or independent coach to hold space for something, there's a very clear behavior that has to change. So I have the privilege of being like, what's not working for you? So I can ask those questions and just sit with it with curiosity. But individuals kind of already have a direction when they sit with me, but I have to hold the space as a practitioner to stay neutral, regardless of what's happening in the room or outside of the room. So yeah, self-care, some kind of spiritual practice with an alignment that makes sense to you are the two things that have been most impactful for me.
Emily, if I may stay with you a little bit longer. So from the point of view of psychology, what is the first step towards awareness? Because we've heard being aware, awareness, this, and what's the first step towards being aware?
Yeah, so I don't have all of my positive psychology frameworks in front of me, so I'm just kind of going with this one. I think the first step is let's use our emotions as signals. Emotions are not something to be ran from. They are amazing data points. So, are you feeling something? Where are you feeling it? What do you think that's in? Why do you think that is? Do you want to feel a different way, right? Okay, if you're currently anxious, how else do you want to feel? What will help move us in alignment, or what will help move us into integrity with the vision, the culture that we're trying to create, right? I think so tuning back into that human element, our emotions, I think is a huge piece of awareness. And especially when we don't like to talk about emotions, where it's not just Arabic culture, Rana. I will argue that almost every company that I've served across the globe has an element of we don't talk about emotions because emotions are scary, right? How do we trust our emotions as data points? I think is a powerful next step. And a variety of different schools of coaching, from the really woo, because, you know, I have some of my clients will say are a little more into esoteric spiritual practices that I've gotten to work with, all the way to very, very classical assessment debrief type coaching, right? I've gotten to work the gamut, but regardless, in every single one of them, I think there's an emotion of, or there's an element of emotional awareness that I'm not sure is always addressed. So I'm going to stick with that. Yeah. Tune into your body. What are you feeling? And trust your emotions as signals or as indicating data points, and not as anything more than that.
You know, I really love this one, and I definitely second it. Emotions. You know, as a neuro language coach, I have learned from neuroscience that we are emotions, whether we like it or not. So yeah, never run away from it. So thank you for that. Uzma.
That's interesting. I think you know, I feel when I'm in a situation, I have like lots of different dialogues running in my head, you know, and I have an outcome already for that client, you know, but how not to portray that outcome is it's a challenge. And I always feel like my biggest thing would be self-reflection.
Yeah.
You know, not just during, you know, the session asking myself questions. I'm not only asking the coachee questions, I'm asking myself these questions in my own head, which
Yeah.
is so important because we have to keep reminding ourselves what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then after the session, I remember my trainer said to me, you know, sit down after the coaching session and give yourself 5 or 10 minutes just to self-reflect and journal. You know, journal what came up in that particular session. For me, I think when I'm working with my clients, if it's one-to-one and it's parents, for example, they want the answer. They want to fix the problem. They want their problem, sorry, to be fixed, right? So if there's any challenging situation in their life, for example, or with their child, they want that problem fixed. Well, you know, and I would love to fix it for them, right? You know, I would love to fix it, but I want them to come to that. And when I'm, for example, training and coaching the corporates, I bring in, like Emily mentioned here, the emotional side of things, and they love it because they'll say, well, nobody taught one delegate said to me, nobody taught this at school. Why did we not learn this kind of stuff at school? Why couldn't we? He was mid-40s, right? Mid-40s manager. Why could we not have learned this at school? Why are we being taught this now? If we were taught about emotional intelligence at school, we surely would have been in a different place right now. So I think it's just so important to look at it both internally and obviously when and externally, because you're sharing that information with them and asking those questions for them then to reflect. So yeah, I think it's really important to bring in the emotional intelligence side into it, the self-reflection, you know, exercises, which are so important in journaling. I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, you know, starting from schools, hopefully, one day that is not too far into the future, that coaching would eventually make its way into educational systems all around the world. And yes, I agree with you, Isma, like self-reflection, whatever it is, however you do it, it helps immensely. So thank you for that. And talking of 10-minute journaling, we are heading towards the end. We're not there yet, but we're just heading there. So 10 minutes or so, and we'll open the floor for the audience for your questions, comments, and feedback. Right, Emily. I think a question that is specifically for you, and Uzma, Rana, feel free to chip in. Absolutely no worries. So as a DEIB, trying to get the letters correctly. Strategist. What blind spots do coaches most often have when trying to, when working with equity principles and so on at the workplace?
Yeah, I think in a workplace context, the coaches that I've worked with in the US that weren't necessarily equity minded explicitly, right?
Yeah.
A gap that I sometimes saw was not necessarily pushing clients to step into the hard as much.
Yeah.
And I say that with understanding what is important, understanding for your client, if it's a group, what are the barriers, specifically if you're trying to upskill, how do we navigate across cultural differences, be it intergenerational, be it cross global borders, whatever it may be. Understand what you're solving for and understand what are the behavioral gaps that from a very pragmatic aspect, right? Equity implies accountability. So how are our leaders being held accountable? How is the organization holding equity, inclusion, these types of things? So I think being able to step into the hard, but then also understanding the framework or the challenges in which we must navigate the nuance, right? Because as you are building emotional awareness with your clients, as you are building cross-cultural resilience, as you are making it easier to step into challenging conversations with authenticity, right? Being able to have a little bit of understanding yourself. There's a lot of things as coaches or as facilitators where we can literally walk in blind. But I think if you're dealing with something more targeted, knowing what it is and stepping into it and not letting it be scary, having that be the specific problem that we're trying to solve. Because if it was a product challenge, if it was a mergers acquisitions kind of problem, right? Those are easier to look at. But the cultural issues, be very specific and understand what are the systems and the nuances through which we're navigating, and just jump in boldly from the beginning. Because the typical coaching tools that many are trained with may not hit the mark alone unless you are intentionally going for enabling specific skills. And that's also another piece where we cannot let our heads and our hearts as practitioners get ahead of us. Rana, I've learned some things the hard way myself, right? Not just you, to be shared vulnerability, share some vulnerability there as well. So the biggest thing I think is not having the cultural humility. If you have only been a executive coach within a singular framework, continue to educate yourself, because I think within silos of practice, we kind of have our own cultures that have been created. So make sure that we understand what we're stepping into, and embrace the cultural element of cultural humility as we're stepping into a new organization or a new culture to navigate across the challenge, because the tools that got us here won't get us there.
Yeah.
Always.
True. Cultural humility and cross-cultural resilience. I really love it. Talking of cross-cultural, Rana, you may have got it that I was coming to you. And the book you have written as well. So navigating the Arab world, the let's say, and the non-Arab world, let's call it that way. What misunderstandings, or if you want to highlight a few, you have come across?
Ooh, do we have time?
This is what I said, all right, a couple, not a few then.
All right. It's to understand, to look at things from the perspective of what are the main motivators of behavior. And let me just say here, when we say Arab culture, of course, the Arab world is not one big lump. There are 22 different countries, each with its own local traditions, each with its own history. But having said that, there is this thread of commonalities that ties all the Arab countries together based in the Muslim culture, the Muslim tradition, and also the Bedouin tradition. Even though, of course, not all Arabs are Muslim and not all Arab countries stem from a Bedouin tradition. But there are those, the main commonality is the main motivator of behavior across Arab culture is to safeguard my honor and avoid shame. So it's an honor-based culture. Safeguard honor, do whatever is considered to be honorable, and avoid shame. And who determines whether I have acted in an honorable or shameful way? It's definitely not the law. It's not the legal system in the same way that it is in an innocence guilt worldview. So in an honor shame worldview, who determines whether I've acted in an honorable way? It's my people, my community. Right. They are the ones who judge it. So if you would walk away with one thing that really would help you navigate Arab culture is to understand how pivotal, how critical the concept of honor is. But even looking at what is considered to be honorable is really differs from one worldview to the other. So in an innocence guilt worldview, so for example, in the US or in the UK or Australia, honorable would mean to abide by the rules and follow the laws and the regulations, right? So this is being right means being honorable. But in an honor-based culture, what honor means is something completely different. And here it's about doing what's best for the community, for the people. So here the relationships becomes very, very, very important. Investing in relationships is very important. Reputation and what the neighbors say about us is very important because they determine whether I've acted in an honorable or a shameful way. So so that affects, just to understand that main motivator of behavior affects everything that we do, affects our communication style. So it becomes, saving face becomes the most important thing to do. So it's very indirect style of communications. It affects how we do business. And so everything's built on relationships, and investing that time and effort in building the relationship is very important. The community and what we do, what's best for everyone else. It's more, it's the opposite of individualistic. So to understanding that would help a great deal in being more culturally intelligent and culturally agile.
Wow, we've got culturally intelligent, cultural agile, or cultural agility, and we have got from Emily. What did we get from you, Emily, regarding culture?
What do we get from me regarding culture?
Cross-culture resilience, and one more.
I'm trying to think what I said, to be honest with you.
Who can help us here? If you do please share.
I will. I think I'm good for now, but I wanted to get if Uzma had anything on this question, because I know that I don't know if she got a chance to answer this one.
Right. Well, I've got a question for Uzma because I do have a lot of questions for you, but I'm going to practice keeping myself, holding my tongue, and giving the floor to the audience. So I'm going to end up with you, Uzma.
Sure.
You have been working with families in what you call bridging the gap. Should I leave it at that, or?
No, you can ask the question.
All right, so that's the question. So you have been working with families, bridging the gap, and when you say the gap, it's that neurodiversity gap, I believe. So
I think I get your question.
yeah,
I get your question. I get your question.
Go ahead.
So bridging the gap, let's say, so in the
Yes.
neurodiversity world, right, Jacob?
Yes.
So yeah,
And if I may,
sure.
families, workplace, and probably community. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So we are bridging the gap between, so working across, families, education and corporate sectors. Not just that, but also bridging the gap between two different worlds, should we say, the neurodiverse world and the neurotypical world, right? So I guess when we're trying to bridge that gap between these two worlds, we want that one world, right? We want the neurodiverse individuals to feel accepted. We want them to have a sense of belonging. We want them to be part of the society. Their neurological difference shouldn't put them in any disadvantage.
Yeah.
So I guess the common thread for us here would be, and I'm going to say, and Emily mentioned this, the psychological safety.
Yeah.
And for us as coaches, being authentic and listening actively. Whether the individual is a child, a parent, or a CEO, inclusion really starts when people feel safe to express their needs and strengths without being judged. So it's really important to create that safe space for them and then allowing them to understand that actually these are not two separate worlds. This is one world that we can all live in together. And really kind of creating those environments where we can celebrate and tolerate. And that's a different topic in itself, Jacob. We just want to be able to accept neurological differences. I think that's my biggest thing when I talk about bridging the gap. And we actually do have an initiative where we have events, global events actually now, where we invite speakers, professionals who can share their expertise in the field, and the neurotypical invited and the neurodivergent invited, and they can come and ask questions. And another common thing here is the fear of communication. There's always a fear of what word, what are the correct words to use? What is the correct terminology? Or we can offend that individual if we say something. And I've spoken to so many different neurodivergent adults, and they'll say to me, there's a barrier because there's a fear of the terminology, what terminology to use. Just ask questions. Don't worry about what words you're using. The more you're going to ask us about how we live daily or what we experience on a daily basis, we're going to remove those barriers and we're going to bridge that gap. So I think that's really important. But this question you asked, Jacob, it's a huge question, and I think I could spend a full day talking about it. So I'm going to end it there. But I just think, let's be, I think my last thing I would like to add, just really be open-minded, about this, because nobody here in this room here, nobody's the same. We're all different. And that's the beauty of it. That could be, like Rana said, cultural differences, right? And also our brains.
Absolutely. Thank you, Uzma.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, everyone. Don't go away yet. We have got, the time for you, and the floor is all yours to ask our speakers today, share comment or feedback. I think you can jump on the mic, I believe, so either that or use the chat box. Yes, Mona, I can see you raising your hand. Go ahead. I think we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to share an experience about culture, which we spoke a lot about tonight. One of the shocking experiences of my life, which may seem small to other people, is when I took one of my daughters to university in Canada. She was enrolling in a program there, and she started orientation, and I went to pay her fees, and I stood in a long queue, 45 minutes. And when I got to the accountant, she said, well, how old is your daughter? And I said, she's 18. And she said, sorry, you can't pay her fees. And that was the shock of my life. And I said, I understand that people under 18 need a guardian, but I'm still her mother. I was almost offended that she didn't accept me paying the fees for my daughter. And that was that. So obviously, you know, there is a difference. There are legal differences, obviously, and, you know, there are sort of cultural sensitivities as well.
Yeah.
I just
Thank you
wanted to
for
share
sharing.
that.
Thank you. Well, I'm interested now, Mona. So did you end up paying or you just left, or if I may ask?
Yes. Well, sorry, I have to unmute again. Well, I had to pay through my daughter. I had to give her the money and she had to stand in another queue and pay because they wouldn't accept the money being paid, you know, because, you know, I wasn't her guardian anymore.
Yeah.
She was an adult.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's very different at home, and that's why I raised it. You can pay for your children, you know, till the last breath.
till they're well in their 60s.
Yeah.
Still the mother.
Thank you for sharing, Mona. Right. Do please feel free to share, ask questions, give feedback. We're absolutely happy to hear from you. I do, Emily, are you saying anything?
I was just reading in the chat. There was
Yes,
a question dropped in the chat.
There is a question to the speakers in the chat, so I'll ask it in a minute, just to give our audience the chance to share, ask questions, or give feedback. I think there's a question to Uzma, Emily, and Rana. What helps people feel truly seen and included when working across different cultures or different ways of thinking? That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a really broad question, but I think two things that have helped that I've seen in a variety of organizations, both that I've gotten to work in and also observed. Specifically when you're speaking of underrepresented populations, what makes them feel safe to show up, right? It's storytelling of success of people that look like them, or storytelling of people that maybe had a experience that, you know, maybe people didn't know that the individual identified as neurodivergent, or in the US, we have a thing called being a first generation college student, or, you know, the first being a mother, being whatever it may be, right? We have identities that if we don't feel safe bringing them to work, seeing others succeed, especially when they're things that we may not have known, right? Because if a woman makes it to an executive position, but we don't know that she had full-time childcare provided by her mother, right? If we had that full information, we could understand what it took her to succeed. Because in the absence of information, we make stuff up. That is the human nature. So storytelling of narratives of what success looks like. And then also creating the space for people to make mistakes and celebrating that. I don't necessarily just want to say celebrating failure, but a lot of the things that I hear from leaders who maybe don't want to say the wrong thing, or you don't want to make a mistake because no one wants to be canceled. We call it cancel culture sometimes here in the West. Allowing people to make mistakes and have folks say, I stepped on stage and said something really dumb and I learned better and I'm doing better because of it. So I think those are the two things. What helps people belong? Tell the stories of those that are different and allow those that are in the majority to make mistakes and to celebrate that and celebrate progress.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Even if we had to celebrate failure, not in the sense that, keep failing, just, learn from it. So, celebrating mistakes. Rana, yes, please.
Yeah, so, I'm going to go back again to the cultural perspective, and that is because I think that's when in the question, is how do we create the third culture space? So there's my culture, there's your culture, there's the organization's culture, there's also the culture of the country in which we're operating. So that becomes quite a lot of different things at play here. So how do we consciously and with awareness understand for each of us what are those key values that are important to us, that make us feel honored, that make us feel right, and that give us life, makes us feel empowered, that we can bring in to this third culture space that we would create together, that will make everyone feel empowered, right, and honored. And that's a kind of an exercise that we do, and the results of it are incredible, how that works. I wanted to bring an actual life example of something that a story that we went through. So before setting up my business, I worked with the British Embassy here in Jordan for a long time, for about 18 years. And so I was head of communications and their government spokesperson. Anyone who's worked in any embassy of anywhere in the world, and mostly in the kind of Western world, everything's very time oriented, of course, and planning way ahead of time. So in January, all staff were asked to complete a log that you register when you're going to take all of your vacations for that entire year. And you're expected to know from January exactly when you're going to take your vacations throughout that year. For all the Brits in the embassy, anyone there, it was pretty easy, very straightforward. We plan way ahead of time. You buy your tickets, you pay for the hotel, you know exactly where you're going to be 8-9 months from now. For the Arab culture, it's incredibly difficult to do that for so many reasons, but it's very challenging. And so what would happen is the head of mission, the deputy head of mission would send out these emails and remind everyone, please log in your leaves. All of the Brits would do that. None of the Jordanians would respond. A second reminder, a third reminder, and then the DHM would come into my office huffing and puffing and thinking, this is very disrespectful. These are the rules. They just need to do as they're told. How difficult can it be for you to log in when you're going to take your vacations? But then explain that in a kind of a fatalistic culture where we believe, the belief is, or perhaps it's just a perception, that I'm not in control of my destiny. I am not in control of what happens. There's so much that I can do. I will show up. I will do what I can do, but the rest is outside of my control. It's up to, you call it the universe, you call it luck, God, Allah. It's beyond my control. So that's why we use the word inshallah, God willing, right? So it's very difficult for me. I have no idea if 6 months from now, I want to go on that vacation, if I'm able to, if I'm alive, if who in my family is, has given birth, died, or getting married, or if there's going to be a war next door. So it's impossible to plan. And so we found a way around it. And that's where it became, having that awareness and the cultural intelligence was to ask that question, as Uzma, you said, ask that question of, okay, so this is the rule that you have put in because the British culture is very rules oriented. So the rule is everybody needs to log in their leave from the beginning of the year. But what is the point of that rule? What purpose does it serve? That the work does not get interrupted, and none of the departments get left without the key people in it. Right. So we went to the DHM and said, okay, if we can guarantee you that the work will not be interrupted and any key departments will not be left without the important people there, would you allow us to log in our leave maybe 3 weeks before we take leave, Of course, there was panic and he almost had a heart attack, but he accepted to try it out. And it worked. It really worked. It gave us that third way of achieving the objective of that rule, while achieving, taking into account why the other cultural perspective is very difficult to actually plan so far ahead. And it worked. So that's a way of, it's not in black and white. It's asking the right questions to understand what are the motivators of behavior? Why is this really important? What's the objective that you want to get to? And then is there another way of getting there, without breaking the rules, because that would make anyone from an innocence guilt worldview have a heart attack, but
hopefully not.
Getting there.
Lovely.
I love that.
All right, so we've got 3 minutes, and I've got really brilliant question, so I don't want to let go of it. So our dear speakers, I'm going to give you probably 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds max to answer. So Gina is asking, as a manager, you want to protect your team and you want them to feel safe, but you've got the upper management, so you are in the middle. How do you deal with that? Starting with Uzma, 30 seconds, go.
Oh, okay. I would say educating. I always go with that because there could be a dispute, there could be a disagreement, there could be somebody stuck in between, like Gina said. But if we could educate the senior leaders, how can we educate them? Share our information, share our knowledge, share what's going on, be open, right? And have this open dialogue about what's going on and maybe get them to come back to you with something, a solution.
Thank you. Educate the senior management. Emily, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm going to say, first of all, be the leader that you can within the greatest extent of your line of influence. So first of all, start with yourself and how you show up and how you empower your team to cultivate the culture you can within the bounds that you have. But then I will also say, I'm just going to leave it at that, actually. Yeah. Be the leader that you want to be within the realm that you can. And that in itself will allow you to become a conduit.
Thank you.
Because if you show up authentically, you will get the information that you need to raise up or educate in line with Uzma said.
That is 32 seconds, Emily. So well done. Right, Rana.
I'm going to echo what Emily said and just say it's self-awareness. The best thing that the manager can do is really to switch on that light bulb and to be self-aware of how her thoughts, behavior, creating the kind of atmosphere, environment, and culture that he's creating in their work that's affecting all staff around them, and to really switch it on that they are literally creating that environment. If it's the kind of environment that they want to see, great. If not, change.
38 seconds, Rana. You're the winner. Everyone, speakers, audience, ICF Jordan chapter, thank you very, very much. Nancy behind the scene, you've been brilliant. Are you sharing anything in the chat box? I think I'll leave you at that.
I'm sharing the next session.
Yes.
I'm sharing the next session. Thank you so much for everyone joining us, sending you lots of love. And the next session has CC units if you are able to join. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was an amazing, and I hope everyone enjoyed it as I did. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye.